නවපෑස් සබන් සහ ක්‍රීම් ජාත්‍යන්තර ළමා රෝග පිළිබඳ විශේෂඥයන් විසින් සායනිකව තහවුරු කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
Tonight, reconciliation. Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pieris tells UN Human Rights Council that Sri Lanka is willing to engage in dialogue with the diaspora community. Unending support. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken agrees to support Sri Lanka and promote investment during phone conversation with PM Ranil Wickremesinghe. Friends close and afar. China and US agree to discuss ways to work together to help Sri Lanka overcome difficulties. Political stability. Justice Minister Vijay Dasa Rajapaksa to give update on cabinet discussion of 21st Amendment. All this and much more coming up on this Monday, the 13th of June 2022.
නවපෑස් සබන් සහ ක්‍රීම් ජාත්‍යන්තර ළමා රෝග පිළිබඳ විශේෂඥයන් විසින් සායනිකව තහවුරු කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana 24 English News Service, and I'm Indivari Amwatha, addressing the 50th regular session of the Human Rights Council, which is taking place in Geneva. Sri Lanka's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor G.L. Pieris, told the Council that the country is formulating concrete measures expected to lead to an IMF-supported program in a bid to stabilize the economy. The Foreign Minister went on to say that Sri Lanka remains open to engage in dialogue with the diaspora community and with civil society organizations committed to the well-being of the country. He also apprised the Human Rights Council on measures taken following recommendations in the previous meeting.
The 50th regular session of the Human Rights Council began today in Geneva and online and will go until the 8th of July.
The international community is well aware of the grave social and economic situation that Sri Lanka has been faced with in recent weeks. While this situation has been aggravated by ongoing global crises, including the pandemic, the focus of the protests has consisted of demands for economic relief and institutional reform. In recognition of these challenges and in moving forward in an inclusive manner, we consider it crucial to heed the aspirations of all segments of our people, in particular the country's youth. As a stable foundation for the future, the President and the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka have called for a consensual approach to national issues through a broad-based government. Far-reaching political changes are already taking place with the appointment of a new Prime Minister and of a new multi-party cabinet in my country. We are actively engaged in evolving an all-party consensus regarding the need for the 21st Amendment to Sri Lanka's constitution to consolidate seminal democratic values enshrined in Parliament, independent institutions and salutary checks and balances on the powers of the executive. At the instance of the Attorney General of the Republic and under direct judicial supervision, fully fledged investigations are proceeding with regard to the incidents of the 9th of May and their aftermath. On the important aspect of the economy, in order to stabilize the situation and provide essentials for our people, we are formulating concrete measures which are expected to lead to an IMF-supported program. In moving forward, we are in dialogue with all stakeholders, including domestic and international partners. We are putting together a coherent structure to place our economy back on a sustainable growth path and to provide for necessities such as food, fertilizer, energy, and medicines. Since the previous meeting, soon after my pledge to the Human Rights Council that the Prevention of Terrorism Act in my country will be amended, I presented legislation to Parliament to amend the PTA, and this was enacted. The cumulative effect of these amendments will make a substantial improvement of and a profound impact upon the existing law and will further cause human rights and human freedoms in Sri Lanka to be strengthened. In this regard, the Inspector General of Police has issued instructions whereby there is a de facto moratorium on arrests being made under the PTA. Law enforcement officials have been instructed to follow due process in the conduct of investigations under the PTA and to use this legislation only in instances of extreme necessity. Sri Lanka, at the same time, remains open to engaging with the diaspora community and with civil society organizations committed to the well-being of our country. In conclusion, therefore, we seek the understanding of this Council regarding the challenging social and economic situation in Sri Lanka. We undertake to engage in the multiple tasks before us and to honor legitimate commitments. Sri Lanka is an active participant in the multilateral framework and has continued its close engagement with the international community and the Human Rights Council to realize the promotion and protection of human rights with justice and equity for our people. The difficult situation we are facing today and the voices of our youth remind us urgently that we need to address these challenges with humility. Our approach then is to recognize the challenge without being overwhelmed or constricted by it, with a clearly conceived objective, clarity regarding the means to accomplish it, and above all, confidence in the resilience of our people, which has served our nation well in the past. We embark on an intricate journey step by step. We are immensely fortified by the sustained goodwill and support of the international community manifested in abundant measure, and we look forward to continuing open engagement.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe had a telephone conversation with the Secretary of State of the United States of America, Antony Blinken, this evening. Now, the Prime Minister had explained the current status of the ongoing discussions with the International Monetary Fund. During his conversation with Antony Blinken, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka has added that Sri Lanka is looking to work closely with the United States and further strengthen ties between the two nations. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had agreed to support Sri Lanka and to promote investment in Sri Lanka after the conclusion of Sri Lanka's talks with the International Monetary Fund. Premier Ranil Wickremesinghe has requested the US Secretary of State to extend his greetings to US President Joe Biden as well. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka is in talks with India, Japan and Singapore on the development of Trincomalee as an investment centre. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, engaging in a youth-driven forum, said the strategic Trincomalee region is being explored for ship repairing service industry. Responding to questions during the session, the Premier added that Sri Lanka must rethink the island's tourism strategy in order to maximise the benefit as a destination before formulating the tourism policy.
Trincomalee Harbour is a suited place for shipmaking. Can't we make an investment, or can't we bring in an investor to make a shipmaking or the boat making company to Trincomalee and make money out of that?
We are trying to develop the potential of Trincomalee as an investment center, as a shipping and industrial center. We are talking with the Indian government, we are talking with the Japanese, I talk with them again, and even Singaporeans. As far as shipbuilding is concerned, I would say that we are more suitable for ship repairing, because between Singapore and the Gulf, there is no place for ship repairing, and Trincomalee will be good place for ship repairing, and that's what we should aim at.
There's been a lot of talk on how we need to improve our dollar remittances in the country. So one important industry is the service export industry in the country. How vital do you think this entire sector is in Sri Lanka?
Well, this sector has a lot of potential for the future. We have to encourage it, since many of our people are talented. Firstly, we have to improve our education system and ensure there are far more people who know IT and English. Secondly, the knowledge base at the university has to be improved depending on the type of services that have been used. And thirdly, to build the environment for these services. And fourthly, what we can do is to ensure there's ease of doing business. There are problems today in doing business, but it's one that uses manpower. So human resource development is the first aspect of it. Secondly is to clear all hurdles for the day-to-day, that is stopping the day-to-day activities or hindering the day-to-day activities of these services. Legal service is one such area. Conveyancing, I know it is much easier to do it here than to do it in UK. There are so many other services, accountancy services, and not only legal services, so much, and there is a good potential of this in Sri Lanka.
50% of surgical operations are being held in Sri Lanka. And we are lacking even the basic medical supplies we need to run the medical system today. We have a long-term plan in order to benefit the medical system to get back to the normal regime.
Shortage is a temporary one. The health ministry is confident that with the funds we are getting, in about 2 months' time, we will be able to have the minimum requirement of medicine and other health equipment, and it will improve as it goes on. But this is a shortage. We accept the fact that we are facing a severe shortage in medicine, in health items. And in addition to this, we want to launch an international appeal for medicine and for nutrition food. We have asked President Nasheed, former President of Maldives, to head the committee.
Speaking further, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe highlighted the need for a change in Sri Lanka's tourism policy as well as in the tax system, key revenue generating sources to the state treasury.
We will have to rethink our tourism. Are we going to have low quality tourism, or like Maldives get a mix of high quality tourists also? So this is one of the issues we have to resolve in this coming few months when we plan for a new tourist policy. In my view, you must maximize what you get from a single tourist rather than running after about 10 people who give you the same income. That's one of the issues that we have. Secondly is, yes, the tax system has to be changed, and we have to do that. It's lopsided, with a lot of money coming from indirect taxes and very little contribution by the direct taxation. But at the moment, we have an import-dependent economy. So if you have to go ahead, we must make it a highly competitive, export-oriented economy. So this is what the restructuring of the economy means. If you restructure the economy and you come here, then you have succeeded. So that's the task we have set upon ourselves.
Now, China and the United States have expressed their commitment to helping Sri Lanka overcome current difficulties. The remarks were made during a discussion between Chinese ambassador in Colombo, Ki Zhenghong, and U.S. ambassador in Colombo, Julie Chang today. U.S. Ambassador Julie Chang has said that the meeting focused on the political and economic situation in Sri Lanka. She said ideas were shared about trade, investment and development. U.S. Ambassador in Colombo, Julie Chang, added that the discussions had also focused on ways to support Sri Lankan efforts to ensure political stability and economic growth. The Chinese embassy, meanwhile, taking to Twitter, said that China and the United States could work together to help Sri Lanka overcome the current difficulties. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is set to reportedly brief the Parliamentary Consultative Committee on the current crisis in Sri Lanka. Indian media reported that the government is likely to brief the members of Parliament on the 18th of June on the economic crisis and the country's neighbourhood first policy, and how and what kind of aid has been provided by the New Delhi government to Colombo. Apart from India's minister, Jaishankar, India's foreign secretary and other Ministry of External Affairs officers will be present at the meeting at the ministry's office. Tamil Nadu government has also sought to help Sri Lanka and sought help from the centre to help the island nation in the crisis, and has sent consignment of medicine and other humanitarian assistance to Sri Lanka. More developments and fuel and gas stocks in Sri Lanka after this break.
Big 3.
Welcome back to the news. The void of a chairman to the largest supplier of LP gas to the market, Litrogas Lanka Limited, was filled with the appointment of Mudita Piris to the post. Mudita Piris previously served as the managing director of the state-run gas supplier during the previous government until year 2019.
For over 6 days now, a vessel carrying 3,900 metric tons of liquefied petroleum gas has been anchored off Thaldiyawatta as Electrogas Lanka Limited remains unable to source adequate US dollars to pay for the cargo. While the state-run gas supply is still looking to source 2.5 million US dollars required to fund the procurement, people are seen continuously standing in line outside domestic gas retail outlets in expectation of LP gas delivery. The supplier has repeatedly requested people not to queue for LPG cylinders as it is unable to distribute gas yet. Given the volatile situation, the void of a chairman to Electrogas Lanka Limited was filled today. Former Managing Director of Electrogas Mudita Pires was today appointed as its chairman. Meanwhile, private-owned gas supplier Laughs has been supplying LPG cylinders to people in many areas in limited quantities, somewhat filling in for the unavailability of domestic gas in the market. Laughs earlier prioritized supply in Colombo and suburbs after resuming LPG delivery last week after a hiatus of 3 months. Today, 1,250 gas cylinders were issued to the area of Hatton for the first time in 6 months. Meanwhile, the shortage of domestic gas cylinders in the country has forced the closure of about 60% of small-scale restaurants. Apart from queues for gas, people also continue to queue in front of refilling stations for petrol and diesel. A tense situation erupted on the baseline road today as a group of protesters blocked the road at the Orogodavatta junction demanding fuel.
Ceylon Electricity Board's Vice Chairman Nalinda Ilangakon has been appointed as the board's new chairman. This development came following the resignation of MMC Ferdinando as the chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board. He tendered his resignation to the Minister of Power and Energy, Kanchana Wijesekara, following a controversial statement made before a COPE hearing last week, referring to the Indian Prime Minister in connection with the awarding of the Manna wind power plant project to the Adani Group of India. Now, the newly appointed chairman Ilangakon had previously served as chairman of the National Youth Corps as well as the director of the Dangerous Drugs Administration. After 3 consecutive trading days of gains, the Colombo Bourse saw its benchmark ASPI close in negative territory, recording a marginal loss. But turnover was at a near 1.5-month low as investors chose to stay sidelined, seeking more clarity on the economic front.
The benchmark all-share price index of the Colombo Bourse opened for the new week on an upbeat note but shed gains on profit-taking on selected stocks. The index saw volatility before closing the day at 7,889, losing 10 points. Turnover recording a near 1.5-month low of 0.8 billion was led by capital goods and food and beverages and tobacco sectors, accounting for a joint contribution of 43%. Foreign investors turned net sellers, recording low participation. The secondary market yield curve meanwhile began the week slightly edged up on the back of selling interest that emerged with profit-taking on 2025 maturity. Accordingly, a 2025 1st June maturity changed hands at 20.25% in the secondary market. A 15 January 2028 maturing bond was quoted around 20.15/30%. 3-month bills were quoted at around 22.50% in midday trade, down from 22.15% on Thursday.
Now, Asian stock markets have fallen sharply as soaring prices in the United States triggered fears the Federal Reserve will take tougher action to rein in inflation. At the same time, the US dollar strengthened to 135 Japanese yen for the first time in over 2 decades. It comes as official figures show on Friday that US inflation hit a more than 40-year high last month. As the week began today, Japan's benchmark Nikkei index ended the day down by just over 3%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng closed 3.4% lower, while the Kospi in South Korea finished down 3.3%. The Australian stock market was closed for the Queen's birthday public holiday. Meanwhile, global oil prices also slipped, with Brent crude falling by around $2 to just over $120 per barrel. At the same time, the Japanese yen fell to a record 135 against the US dollar for the first time in over 2 decades, while the Indian rupee has fallen to a new record low as it dropped below 78 to the US dollar. Bitcoin fell below $25,000 to its lowest level since December 2020. Markets continue to react negatively on the back of data from Friday that showed prices in the US increased faster than expected last month as rising energy and food costs pushed inflation to the highest level since 1981. The annual inflation rate rose to 8.6% in May after easing in April. That confounded hopes that inflation had peaked and instead put investors on alert that the Federal Reserve may take more robust action to tackle the issue. The Fed is due to make its next policy announcement on Wednesday. Markets currently see an 80% chance that it will raise its main interest rate by 0.5 percentage point again. Last month, the Federal Reserve announced its biggest interest rate increase in more than 2 decades, lifting its benchmark interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to a range of 0.75% to 1% after a smaller rise in March. A major issue in the US is the rising cost of fuel, with the price of petrol averaging more than $5 a gallon for the first time in the United States. US Treasury yields rose above 10-year borrowing costs today, the so-called curve inversion that often heralds economic recession. On expectations, interest rates may rise faster and further than anticipated. Fears the US Federal Reserve could opt for an even larger rate hike than anticipated this week to contain inflation sent 2-year yields to their highest levels since 2007. But a view is also playing out that aggressive rate hikes may tip the economy into recession.
The gap between 2 and 10-year Treasury yields fell to as low as -2 basis points before rising back to around 5 basis points. The curve had inverted 2 months ago for the first time since 2019 before normalizing. An inversion of this part of the yield curve is viewed by many analysts as a reliable signal that recession could come in the next year or two, Reuters reported. The move follows inversions on Friday in the 3-year, 10-year and 5-year, 30-year portions of the Treasury curve after data showed US inflation continued to accelerate in May. 2-year Treasury yields rose to a 15-year high around 3.25% before easing to 3.19%, while 10-year yields touched the same level, the highest since 2018.
Now, the Cabinet of Ministers in Colombo met this week to discuss the 21st Amendment after it was not given the green light last week. To discuss what the present situation of passing the 21st Amendment into legislation, I've invited to our studios Justice Minister Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa. A very warm welcome to you, Minister. I think we discussed the 21st Amendment initially when you took the initiative, saying it's towards political stability in Sri Lanka. But why is it taking so long after all party leaders have expressed their support to this amendment, and yet Cabinet does not seem to have approved it?
Now, we have already presented this to the Cabinet. Even after we presented it, that we wanted to have a series of dialogue with many stakeholders, and we had a series of dialogue with the main opposition. Then thereafter we met all the leaders of the political parties which are being represented in the parliament. Then there are some other political parties who are not represented in the parliament that we discussed with them. Then all the religious leaders and civil societies, then professional associations like Bar Association of Sri Lanka. That we have discussed with all those parties, and now we have come to a certain understanding as to how the 21st Amendment, now it goes as 22nd since the 21st has already been printed, as to how that we should form the best way to resolve the issues involved in this country, and that is in the process.
Minister, now last week we heard that we've been talking about a clause that the president can in writing remove the prime minister at any given time. But last week after the cabinet meeting, concerns were raised about the 21st Amendment, which doesn't ensure this. What's the update on that?
No, on that there was the lengthy dialogue, discussion. Finally, in considering the fact that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna has the majority in the parliament,
right,
and we'll have to get the consent of all the political parties virtually in the parliament, and thereafter we agreed on some transitional provision that is an exception to the general clause which permits the removal by the president during the tenure of this existing parliament, provided that he is of the opinion that the prime minister, the person holding the office of prime minister, has lost the confidence of the members of the parliament.
Right.
That is only an interim arrangement during this period, but thereafter it will continue as it was in the original draft.
You've been conducting discussions, parties have been meeting, but do you observe a political will among parliamentarians and parties to move towards this?
No, I am advocating for that political will. I am certain that as the way that we did in the 19th Amendment, I think that we can get the support of all the parties.
Give us a brief on today's cabinet meeting, Minister. How you all discussed the 21st, the 22nd Amendment now?
Yes, that we discussed it in the cabinet, and in fact that we wanted to go through in detail few points, and we fixed a meeting with the President on this Thursday evening. After that we agreed the bill to be taken up for consideration on the cabinet meeting on Monday.
And have you included all proposals by the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, the Samagi Jana Balawega, because they insisted that all these proposals be included in the amendment?
Yes, that is the only area where that there was a disagreement as to whether that the president shall retain the power.
Right.
And also the other issue was as to whether the president could hold any portfolio. There also, after the discussion, we came to an agreement. The president will hold the portfolio of defense, because in terms of the constitution we don't think that you can delegate that power. All those matters will be finalized on this Friday.
Right.
Thursday.
Again, you've been talking about the political stability that is envisaged through the amendment, but is this the priority now given the country's situation? Do you think bringing in the 21st Amendment will steer the country towards solving the political and economic crisis that we're faced with?
No, that I discussed with several diplomats, also with some of the international organizations. Although they are willing to support in different ways to Sri Lanka at a time like this, we are facing the most difficult period in our lifetime. But they insist on, from their point of view also, that there has to be a political stability. That is the second issue is, even if we have to legitimately enter into any kind of transaction with any of those organizations or state, still they are concerned as to whether there is a political stability. Therefore, we cannot deny the fact that unless there is a political stability, making the economic stability will become a dream.
What do you understand in Parliament? We are talking about referendums, reforms. What do we see next in Sri Lanka?
No, that we have drafted our bill in a way just to avoid any kind of orders from the Supreme Court to compel us to hold referendum.
Right.
But finally that Supreme Court will have to decide any particular clause is required the approval of the referendum or not. Holding of a referendum is not possible because of this political turmoil and economic instability. But with all that, we are hopeful after the enactment of the we'll say that for the time being 22nd, but if it is enacted first, it will be the 21st. thereafter to go for a new constitution, there of course that you will have to go for a referendum because the people need that, people demand that there has to be some radical change to abolish the executive presidency and to vest that power in the parliament.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your time here. I know it's a very long and busy day for you, but thank you for sharing your thoughts on AdaDerana English. We had with us Dr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa, Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms, discussing the 21st Amendment and the way forward with us. And that wraps up tonight's edition of your English news on AdaDerana 24. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.